National perspective on this presidential race. We welcome back to Capitol Square ABC's senior editor of world news and political analyst Rick Klein. Rick, welcome back to Ohio.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, let's begin with an interview that I had with Governor Romney on Wednesday. It created a little bit, to say the least, a little bit of national interest. I want to show the clip here and then just right out of the gate get your sort of view of what was said and kind of the implications of it. Rubio is being debated, I believe, later this week, that deals with banning or allowing employers to ban providing female contraception. Have you taken a position on it? He's said he was for that, and we'll talk about personhood in a second, but he's for that. Have you taken a position on it?
I'm not for the bill, but look, the idea of presidential candidates getting into questions about contraception within a relationship between a man and a woman, a husband and wife, I'm not going there.
All right, so Rick, I mean, I got to be honest, he was so definitive in saying, I do not support that bill, that I took it just as sort of as a pivot. Here we go. You know, he's looking at Ohio. He's in Ohio. He needs Ohio. He's probably not going to win the state if he wins it at all by more than 51, 52%. Here comes the great big Republican pivot back to the center. But what happened there?
Well, what happened there is he went on serious damage control. He immediately called a radio station in Boston, someone that he's been on the phone with a lot over the years, and said, I misunderstood the question. Of course I'm for the Blunt Amendment. So this sent a lot of shockwaves through the conservative establishment. Even though he ended up where most conservatives are, where most Republicans in the Senate are, he shocked a lot of people with that answer and it questioned a couple of things. One is, did he really misunderstand it, or did he then just get whacked by folks on the right and have to change his position? If he did just misunderstand the question, was he not paying attention? Because this Blunt Amendment is no small deal. It's being voted on in the United States Senate. It's a very big deal. It's very high profile, and it's something that almost everyone on the right now is intensely focused on. So it wasn't an out-of-left field type of question, and so the fact that he got the answer quote-unquote wrong was surprising to a lot of folks.
I'm just surprised that, you know, one of his responses was, well, I thought he was asking a question about an Ohio bill. I mean, I mentioned Blunt, and I kind of give a synopsis of what it is. It still leads to the question that is yet unanswered, in my view, having asked the question, which is, you definitively stated, I do not support that bill. I mean, he had to be talking about some bill that he does not support. I mean, that's what's so confusing here.
I agree with you, and that's why a lot of folks who heard that clip initially said, wait a second, Mitt Romney just gave a really bad answer from our perspective, because it was a pretty clear question. You set it up. You didn't just throw a name or a number out there at him and ask him to respond, and he came out against it. So there was something specific in his mind. Clearly, he didn't know what it was, and or he got it wrong the first time, and he wasn't accurately stating his own position.
So, Rick, I mean, at some point, what I thought was happening in that interview, which is the pivot to the middle, and to try to disassociate from Rick Santorum and the social conservative issues, knowing that this is going to be, by all accounts, a tight race. You need 270 electoral votes, you need swing states, and you need independents. At some point, the initial answer that he gave, maybe not on the specific bill, but he's got to moderate at some point, right?
That's right, and there's a larger truth here. This is exactly what Republicans, or particularly Mitt Romney, does not want to be talking about in the run-up to the Ohio primary. He did that in the run-up to the Michigan primary, and it drove the negative ratings for Republican candidates off the cliff when it comes to independent voters. A lot of independents are watching the entire Republican debate and saying, why are they talking about contraceptive coverage? Why are we doing that? Now, the United States Senate, of course, is forcing the issue and bringing it back to that, but this is not what Republicans want to be talking about in battleground states. This is a snapshot, as it was, of course, just very recently in Michigan, now in Ohio. This is a snapshot for the fall. This is the taste that voters are going to be left with in their mouths, whether or not they're Republican primary voters. A lot of folks are seeing this messaging going on right now in Ohio, and to a lot of independent voters, a lot of female voters, all of this talk about contraception is just perplexing.
One last quick question on this interview, and then we'll move on. What kind of, does it have lasting impact, or does it just, does this just feed into the narrative of Mitt Romney being on one side of one issue 1 hour and another side of an issue another hour? I mean, you got the national perspective there. What are the implications of this?
I actually think that there's a national implication that's a bit different than that, and that is that social conservatives and even fiscal conservatives say Mitt Romney may be talking the talk, but he certainly doesn't know the language that we're supposed to be speaking here very well. So even if you're inclined to believe him that he misspoke when he answered your question, they're still questioning how he could have misspoken when this is something that's that well known. The focus on whether or not he is a genuine article of a conservative, given his shifting positions on social issues and other things over the years, is something that's getting intense focus in the closing hours. And if you looked even at the voters in Michigan, the very conservative voters, they were all Santorum folks. It was only the moderately conservative ones, the ones a little bit toward the middle, that were Romney voters. He's having a lot of trouble with conservatives. It'll hurt him not just in Ohio, but in the number of the southern states that are voting as well.
Well, let's talk about, 48 hours, kind of the Ohio perspective looking out, and I'll ask for your national perspective looking in, but I kind of view this as must win for Santorum, because if you look at the states on Tuesday, he's got to have a win somewhere, and no better place than Ohio. And it could put him back in the game, right? If we assume that Newt Gingrich is going to do well in those southern states, Georgia, Oklahoma, Tennessee, he'll have headlines come Wednesday morning. If Romney only wins Massachusetts and Vermont and Santorum takes Ohio, we could be back to square one in all of this.
That's right. And really the stakes are higher for Santorum if you think about it, because he's the one that has to now prove himself. He didn't win in Michigan. If he's able to pull it off in Ohio, then it's something that he can turn around and say, I can win in the big industrial battleground state, the kind of state that has voters that matter for the fall election. He hasn't done that yet.
Rick Santorum had called Mitt Romney on this program a couple weeks ago a hypocrite. Romney didn't like that very much. But, there's no chance of a Romney-Santorum ticket, right? They don't like each other.
No, I think there's a lot of reasons why that won't happen. One is the personal animus, but that happens. McCain and Romney had a lot of personal problems in the last cycle, and by all accounts, Mitt Romney got serious consideration for that ticket. I think the bigger issue that you won't see Romney go to Santorum is that you're talking about two northeastern Republicans. There's some regional issues that would create if this party needs to appeal across the country. And also, I think just the tone that they're taking. Mitt Romney really is about the economy when it comes down to it. He is Mr. Fix-It when it comes to the economy. The animating issues behind Rick Santorum's candidacy and really him as a person have more to do with the social issues. So I think there's a mismatch there that is a little bit deeper even than the barbs that are flying out there.
Newt Gingrich, I guess I had kind of given him Georgia, as you mentioned, along with Tennessee and Oklahoma. You're now suggesting that Santorum might do better there. If Santorum wins there, Gingrich has no legitimacy, right? He is sort of the southern regional candidate in all this.
Well, if Newt Gingrich doesn't win Georgia, then I don't see there's any path forward whatsoever. If he wins Georgia and it's close in Tennessee and Oklahoma, then I think he can at least make an argument to himself, but that may be the way to get out gracefully after winning your home state. But you're right. Look, Newt Gingrich has not been part of the conversation of this campaign for about a month now. That's an enormous amount of time to go dark. He didn't compete seriously in either of the states that voted last week, and for him to then go into Super Tuesday and only be looking at a few regional pockets where he can compete is very problematic. Ohio is the big prize, and he is not part of the conversation in Ohio at this moment. If that changes somehow, and he's made this big appeal on gas prices, and he's injected a lot of economic things into his repertoire, if that changes and he's able to compete in Ohio, then they're talking about something else. But as of now, Newt Gingrich is not a factor in this nomination
And
fight.
in 48 hours, probably not going to happen. Ron Paul, a lot of talk the past week from conspiracy theorists, and I asked Mitt Romney about it, actually, whether he was in collusion with Ron Paul, and he laughs about it. Both of them laugh about it. But there is a reality here, Rick, and that is you need 1144 to get the nomination. If you're at 1100 and you arrive in Tampa, Ron Paul might be where you go to get those last 100 delegates.
2 points. One, you're exactly right. And I think a lot of smart analysts are starting to focus on that and saying, look, if he's close, it could be Ron Paul who throws him over the top. Number two, though, the second point I'd make is that if you've talked to some of the Ron Paul activists / delegates at the convention, they are not inclined to vote for Mitt Romney. I'd be surprised if Ron Paul is able to walk into Tampa and issue marching orders to them for them to vote for Mitt Romney. They really don't like the guy. So whatever personal connection, and clearly there's some affinity between Ron Paul and Mitt Romney, does exist, and whatever Ron Paul could try to swing a convention in his favor, I think a lot of the troops would balk before taking orders like that.
I had really thought all year that Romney would eventually pick somebody like Rob Portman, somebody safe, somebody vetted, somebody who is inclined not to say anything provocative. But we might be looking at a game change type. Romney might be forced here to pick somebody on the far right. Is that your perspective?
I think you're right. I think if he's looking at an election where he's likely to lose, where the economy has gotten better and he is not as likely as he thought coming into the year to be that win on that issue, then I think he starts to reconsider this and start thinking big and going with another white guy, say that another white politician that has the same haircut as he does, like a Rob Portman or Governor Bob McDonnell in Virginia, is less appealing. Then you start thinking maybe Chris Christie, who's got some real energy, Marco Rubio, of course, trying to get Latino voters, Susana Martinez, the new governor of New Mexico. So I think the idea of scrambling things a little bit and going a little bit bolder becomes more appealing to a candidate the less likely that candidate thinks they're going to win in the fall.
I want to save a little time to talk about the president and his campaign, but first, I mean, who's hovering out there in the Republic? If there were to be a brokered convention, and I know that that's still way off, but the superstars of the Republican Party, is it Sarah Palin, Jeb Bush, Chris Christie? I mean, are those sort of the hovering big planets here that the party would turn to in case Romney fails to get where he needs to go?
I don't see anyone out there. I mean, first of all, the big folks have all ruled it out. And I think the idea of a broker convention, it appeals to folks like us who love covering politics.
Yeah, we would love that.
The story of that. Two problems with that. One is there's no brokers anymore. And I think Mitt Romney would walk into a convention that's contested the overwhelming odds-on choice. He's not going to just give up. His people aren't going to just give up. The other problem, of course, is then you have to actually find someone who is willing to do this against the odds. That person is going to go into Tampa, the underdog, not with the money, not with the delegates, not with the campaign infrastructure, knowing they're going up against what still is a Romney juggernaut. That's tough to do if you're a Jeb Bush, if you're a Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana. You have to decide whether that's actually in your heart. A lot of people talk about Sarah Palin, and I think she's obviously surprised people over the years. But the issue there is that she would not be appealing to necessarily the folks who have seen the most angst over this. She's not coming at it from the middle. She'd be coming at it more from the Tea Party right. And I think that's where you see a serious fracture in the party that could end up sinking whoever the Republican nominee is.
Rick, we're down to the last minute. But the president, he's up and running, raising a lot of money, watching this Republican fight, and the economy seemingly getting better. I mean, the narrative might be completely different than what we thought it might be, even in January, at the beginning of the year. If he's got a growing economy, he goes on offense, right? He starts playing for Ohio and some of these traditionally Republican-leaning states, and he might be in better political shape come summer than we ever thought.
That is always the big issue, the famous expression, it's the economy, stupid. For now, for Republicans, it's going to have to be fill in the blank, stupid. And that blank is a hard thing to fill in, to try to find an issue that's going to animate the electorate if the economy is on the mend, if it is on the rebound. He's got a good story to tell. Obviously, he had a good story to tell in Michigan. He's got a better story to tell in Ohio than he did just a few months ago. And that's going to happen across the country. If the economy keeps moving in that direction, then the trend lines are going to be in President Obama's favor. There's no question about it. Republicans are then going to have to find a different way to run against the president. He still is vulnerable, but the idea of him being vulnerable purely on economic issues, much less likely to be the case if we're seeing a growing economy.
Rick, from a national perspective, looking into the state of Ohio, we've talked several times. We knew that we'd have this discussion of Ohio's importance when we got closer to the general election. From a national perspective, looking in, how important is Ohio Tuesday night?
I think it's critical in how long this race lasts. I think if Rick Santorum can't win in Ohio, then his campaign, in terms of being a serious threat for the nomination, is effectively over. You've got a chance for Mitt Romney is going to be the delegate winner on Tuesday night, almost certainly, because of a quirk in Virginia, the big state where Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum aren't even on the ballot. So you have to overcome that with some momentum. If you don't get that momentum in the big industrial battleground state of Ohio, you don't have it anywhere. He wasn't able to close a deal in Michigan, Rick Santorum was. If Mitt Romney wins Ohio, he is almost certainly going to be the nominee. He keeps that track moving. So yes, I think Ohio is more important than any other state at this moment right now in the primary process.
RNC might look at those rules too and go back to that winner-take-all system, right?
That's right. I think they're rethinking a lot of things over there. This was the idea, to elongate it. When you're living in the middle of it, it hurts a lot more.
Yeah, it's not quite as good when you're actually in it. All right, Rick Klein, as always, my friend, thank you so much, and we'll check in with you quite a bit between now and November. Thank you.